one of the most powerful federations in the Olympics, came out and said, hey, you guys can't go to the Olympics anymore. And these two guys, they actually hired a law professor who filed an antitrust complaint, and they won. So when
Wow.
that happened, we said, hey, look, this is a perfect case precedent for this. With using this, if we have the right backing, we should be able to get the athletes comfortable with this legal position, and start recruiting some of these Olympic athletes into full contact.
Hello, we have Bryan here on our next episode. Very excited to have him on board. Thanks for joining us, Rob.
Thanks for having me on today.
We're excited to have Rob here because he is the CEO and founder of Karate Combat. It is the world's only stand-up striking exclusive league, professional fight league, and they are going gangbusters. They're literally taking over the industry. In addition to that, Rob has a really amazing background here. He is a pioneer in integrating cybersecurity into medical devices through MedSec, which I think you still are involved in, and also has a traditional finance background with a decade in hedge funds before shifting into being an operator as opposed to more of an evaluative investor side. So thanks for joining us, Rob. It's really exciting to be able to get through all these, your history, and we're going to have a lot of ground to cover here.
Yep. It's definitely been an interesting time, especially the past 5 years at Karate Combat.
Yeah, so what's really cool about your background and kind of what you've been up to, and I've kind of seen the story of Karate Combat evolve as we've known each other. I think I stumbled on meeting you at a Karate Combat event. I was there with my kids just for a fun night out. Obviously, I've got my martial arts side of me, so we were just there for kind of a fun night out. We were in the Orlando area. We stumbled on each other and, got to talking and, over, a couple steaks and some poker games later, we're talking about business and life. And, hearing your story really made me want to have you on the show here. Because as I see it, I mean, you've got a whole history of legal puzzles that you pretty much spotted and solved as the keys to sort of all of your business opportunities. Obviously pepper in a lot of other things too, but really there were some pretty cool legal puzzles that you solved all the way through. So I think, intersecting the legal and business environments, you're a perfect perfect guest to speak to a lot of topics.
Yep. Definitely something I focused on in my career. I actually started out originally on Wall Street, and I was in the distressed debt department at Cyrus Capital, and that's where I sort of started to think about, business things, but with this legal angle as well. And that's sort of the perfect training ground. You're doing all the finance side, understanding these businesses, and then there's this huge unknown legal component that's always involved in those types of investments.
Could you bring us through? I gave a short, quick, a little snippet bio intro. Anything that you want us to kind of know and understand about you before we kind of get through the story and some of those lessons along the way?
Nope. I would say to just oversimplify it. I spent about the first 10 years of my life on Wall Street, and then the last 10 years I've been an entrepreneur. Investing and running a variety of businesses.
Okay, so right off the bat, I want to ask you, transitioning from essentially, you said the first decade of your life to the last, what was it, 5 to 10 years, kind of two distinct phases. That's a hell of a shift, and I don't think most people could even appreciate the extremity of that. Can you kind of walk us through that, explain the two phases of your life, how extremely different they are, and then what prompted you to make such a shift in the first place?
Yeah, well, I would say definitely the biggest difference that I didn't appreciate about it is that even when I was working on Wall Street, I worked at a number of different funds, actually ran my own fund for a period of time. Most of the employees involved there are just super type A, hardworking. You're really working with some of the brightest people out there. So managing people, while challenging, is just a much different story than managing the employees that you see in more of a corporate environment. If you tell some guy that just, got out of Goldman Sachs to go analyze an investment, he's going to act a certain way. If you're working with someone who's, been a fighter their whole life, and now they're helping recruit fighters, managing those types of people and kind of getting so many people that are doing so many different things in the right direction, is for sure one of the largest challenges. And it's something that you don't face nearly the same way on Wall Street. So that was definitely the big change for me. Um, as far as why I made the jump initially, I was actually taking some time off in between positions, and I was an investor in MedSec, and I saw what they were doing there. At that point, it was just researchers, which are essentially hackers at the time, were the only ones working there. And I saw a pretty big opportunity, and it was clear that they had a need for someone on the business side. So it just sort of evolved to the point where, I was CEO running the company.
So it was almost so you kind of were in the investor hat role with MedSec. And just to clarify, we've talked a million times offline here, but for the podcast sake, MedSec essentially was spotting a gaping hole in the market where medical devices, such as pacemakers, things like that, were completely hackable. And now I'm guessing that some of these things are more regulatorily enforced, but you guys kind of pioneered that landscape by making sure that these devices weren't just completely a hackathon and, gaping holes all over the place for people's health, right?
Yeah, so in medical devices, you have a lot of legacy embedded systems. And almost any environment, whether it's infrastructure, definitely in the medical field where there's a large number of legacy systems, the cybersecurity is very, very tough because a lot of times, say you have a train track switch, that thing's 20 years old, you don't have the money to replace the hardware. A lot of times, the existing hardware isn't capable to have the same cybersecurity elements that are needed today. And that was definitely the case in the medical device industry, even more so. What happened in the field that was unique, there was a DMCA Act that was unusual for cybersecurity. So normally, if I have a device and it's in my garage, I'm allowed to hack the device legally. And frankly, companies out there have something called a bug bounty program, where if you find an error in the device and you report it to the company, they'll actually pay you for that, and that they're happy for people to find these vulnerabilities for them. In medical device cybersecurity, it was different because there was in the DMCA Act, which was originally designed, I'm pretty sure it was a DMCA Act, it was designed to protect CDs, and it made it illegal for you to even attempt to hack a CD. For some reason, the medical device manufacturers got medical devices included in that as well. So, you couldn't really take a pacemaker, go in your garage and find those vulnerabilities. What we did, which made a lot of sense, is we teamed up with one of the top cardiothoracic surgeons in the world, from the University of Chicago, and we launched a study into the safety of these devices. And that's how we were able to find some vulnerabilities in a way that made sense. And what we did was, essentially we went to the companies. It wasn't always straightforward. There were some bumps along the way. But today, we've definitely gone a long way. I think we do business with 8 or 9 of the top medical device manufacturers today. And we're involved in all aspects there, from medical device security to helping them with some of the regulatory conditions. And we're also getting involved on the hospital side as well, helping attack the problem of a lot of these medium and small size hospitals being insecure.
So is it safe to say that this special status that the medical devices had from a protective standpoint almost created the vulnerability in the first place by not not being as openly targetable before saying here's some constructive news about your systems, and then you guys kind of saw that as an opportunity to kind of run with the ball on?
Yep, for sure. I mean, almost always open source, for cybersecurity makes sense, being open about vulnerabilities. And obviously you have an ethical need to tell people with a vulnerable device that vulnerability exists. And everyone in cybersecurity will say, oh, it's crazy to kind of hide problems or, do these certain things. But, at the same time with legacy devices, you do need to approach the situation, a little bit differently. And it just takes some time to get the industry, up to, so sort of open source status that you see in more of these tech forward companies today.
Since you guys saw that opportunity and went into that market space, have you seen regulatory differences kind of almost adapt to that landscape, and how has that affected the business landscape for MedSec specifically?
Yeah, there's actually been a lot of changes. There's been more regulation, but also in a positive manner. And a lot of times regulation just acts as a barrier to entry for big business. But I think on the cybersecurity side and medical devices, the regulatory environment is actually moving the right direction. You have a lot of instances where regulators are actively trying to work with these companies and actively set up good frameworks to move cybersecurity forward.
Very cool. So then how did you get from cybersecurity and medical devices over to professional fight leagues?
Well, that was an interesting one. So I was actually transitioning away from CEO's MedSec. I hired this lady, Justine Bone, who was an industry veteran as the company grew, got more corporate, and I didn't have the extensive knowledge of cybersecurity that she did. And
Hmm.
funny enough, my wife wanted me to take a meeting with her dad, and I don't speak a lot of I don't speak hardly any Spanish. I live in Miami, I should, but I'm terrible with languages. And he didn't speak any English, so I was kind of putting the meeting off. And when I spoke to him, it was pretty simple. He said, "Hey, karate is a huge market, a huge untapped market with no branding, and you have these incredible Olympic athletes. And the current format really doesn't showcase their skills at all. They're doing point fighting, not full contact. Point fighting just doesn't work as a media product whatsoever." And he said, "Look, there's a huge opportunity there, to pay these guys a bit more, have them fight full contact, and the karate style of fighting. There's a reason that in movies it's karate, not jujitsu. It'll be a super exciting and entertaining product if you can execute on this correctly."
So again, just kind of what you saw as a gaping market opportunity that was brought to your attention and almost too good to pass up.
Well, at first, to tell you the truth, I was like, "Oh, this sounds like a terrible idea, right? Full contact karate. Like there's no way a million people haven't tried this before, right?"
Right.
So I actually started doing some research, and that's when it got very interesting. So essentially, what had happened was the WKF, the Olympic League,
And that's
they
World
would
Karate
essentially,
Federation for those
yeah,
unaware.
yeah, exactly. So they would essentially prevent athletes from competing in the Olympics if they were part of any other league. UFC, MMA, especially other karate leagues. And it wasn't amateur versus pro difference because they had, pro fighters as well. It was essentially just anti-competitive behavior. And yeah, it's obviously created a really tough situation for these athletes. We let our
Hmm.
athletes compete in the Olympics. Obviously it's their dream. We would never want to take that away from them. And we also let them compete in our league as well. The
As the
interesting,
landscape stood before you got involved, really they would have a very hard choice to make where they could either continue in their sports, in their amateur sports league fashion, up to and including potentially Olympics, but certainly the WKF, the World Karate Federation circuit. But if they wanted to do anything outside of that, such as, UFC, MMA, whatever, basically they're kissing all that goodbye.
exactly. And it makes it even harder because if you're the best point fighter, how you don't really know how you're going to do in full contact. So
Hmm.
you're kind of making them jump in the water before they know exactly what's going to happen. And as a result, even though these fighters, a lot of them train full contact, they enjoy fighting full contact. Um, they remained in the Olympic format. What we found was quite interesting at the time, right around when this idea came to my desk, something similar had happened in speed skating. So I think it was two Dutch speed skaters. They did an event in the Middle East, and they got paid just $3,000 or $4,000. And the skating federation, one of the most powerful federations in the Olympics, came out and said, "Hey, you guys can't go to the Olympics anymore." And these two guys, they actually hired a law professor who filed an antitrust complaint, and they won. So when
Wow.
that happened, we said, "Hey, look, this is a perfect case precedent for this. With using this, if we have the right backing, we should be able to get the athletes comfortable with this legal position and start recruiting some of these Olympic athletes into full contact."
Outstanding. So you could have just literally walked away from it and said, well, this is the reason why it's not a thing. but instead you really, in legal vernacular, issue spotted. This is a massive antitrust issue. You had your precedent, albeit a different sport, but same analysis applied, and you basically, again, kind of swung over to let that create the market opportunity for the creation of your entire league.
Yep, exactly. And it was really just fortuitous timing because that I don't know if I would have really noticed this issue, before you had the case precedent. I wouldn't really know how that would pan out. A lot of the
Hmm.
antitrust stuff is unpredictable. It takes a long period of time. But that ruling had literally just come out 2 months earlier, so it was
That's
just
beautiful.
perfect timing.
So tell us real quick, I mean, in a nutshell, how's it been going ever since?
So it's been going great. I think it's rare that you have a startup without a lot of big hiccups. So when we started the league, it was different enough. So first we did almost 8 months of testing. We test all the different rules. We wanted to come out with a bang. And when you're doing a new sport, we really wanted something to show people first. So we went over to Budapest to the one of the world's largest movie studios, and we actually had an event, sort of underground, Fight Club style.
That's
Uh,
wild.
Full contact with these Olympic athletes, and we filmed it, so all this stuff was on tape delay. And then we essentially were able to release these episodes online, a month later. So we said, "Hey, look, here's Karate Combat." We even had a trailer for the event, and that was the first thing people ever saw.
Wow.
And our first video on Instagram, we started a new account. We put that video up there, and it got 4 million views. So, it was all theory if there was really that market there in karate for this type of product. But as soon as we saw the initial reception, we said, "Oh, this is definitely looks like it's good product market fit." So
That's
over
awesome. So there's your proof of concept in terms of how the market received it.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So after we did the initial event, the next sort of challenge that we had was, how to start. We were pretty much self-funded between the founders the first 3 years. So we sort of had this issue, how are we gonna launch the sports league off the funding we have? A lot of the other leagues, I think PFL initially raised 30 million. I think they've already spent hundreds of millions of dollars. And initially, sports leagues are very cost intensive. The reason is because if people see, a couple of fighters fighting and it's an odd environment, like people are having dinner, they assume it's not the best fighters. You really need
Mhm.
that crowd energy and generally a large stadium in order to get that intensity. And even if you're, pretty healthy league, if I'm going to go to Miami and I need to get 20,000 people to fill the American Airlines Center, you have to have a pretty big world. You need to have, more than millions of fans worldwide to have
Right off
20,000
the
fans
bat.
in Miami, right?
Yeah.
So now you're in the ticket selling business. You're spending tons of money locally to advertise. A lot of the average ticket price for these leagues is hardly break even, and you're just spending a lot of money to kind of get butts and seats up front,
Uh-huh.
get local interest in these areas to have events. And we wanted to figure out how we could get around that problem.
Hmm.
So we actually ended up focus grouping a lot of different things. And we found out, if you just take a boxing ring and you put an exact location, that doesn't really work. But if you change everything about the look and feel and make it almost more cinematic, the audience then likes it, even though you don't have the huge stadium environment. So we have a different fighting arena, the pit. All the audience are standing. Initially, a lot of them were like either dressed nice, wearing different things, but based on where we were. And we filmed it with cinematic cameras as well. The important thing about our venue is with other types of fighting, you're filming through a ring or you're filming over the top of a cage. They're really not
Yeah, that
that.
really gets in the way of that visibility. That cage isn't really, even if
Yeah,
you have
yeah,
good seats, it's hard to watch and really pay attention to the details.
yeah. If you look at the UFC, they have, five guys sitting on stools with the, steady cams over the top of,
Yeah.
the cage for them. So anyhow, we found when we changed a whole bunch of things, the audience really liked it as a unique new product. Almost a combination between, visually combination between a movie and a sport. So that was our initial read, and For the first year, we did events in exact locations. So we had an event at the top floor of the World Trade Center. We had an event at the Acropolis in Greece. We had a lot of problems. I don't think it hadn't rained in like 20 years in the summer in Greece, and of course it
God.
started pouring the day of our event, right?
It's
We're in the
Murphy's Law.
Acropolis like last second trying to like make this tent device.
They're all
Uh,
doing the rain dance. You're like, no, hold on
yeah,
for one more weekend.
yeah, the production truck in Greece is like the size of like an ice cream van, right? We're trying to get most advanced production out of it. Yeah, it was definitely an interesting time, but astonishingly, we were able to do our initial events cost cost effectively. And the one thing that always did really well was rather than have it in exact locations, have it in crazy places, like on a spaceship, someplace that doesn't exist. And we
Okay,
said,
that
oh, well, it's
cinematography.
still a real sport, we'll let diminish the sport. That's the one thing that we were crazy, we thought it was a little bit too crazy even for us. But after year one, actually, my co-founder really, really thought it was the way, strongly thought it was the way to go. So we decided to try it. And now it's much easier to do when we started. When it started, you essentially had to use movie technology. So we were doing it in Maya, but you build the background in one software package. The lighting's a different software package. You have to sort of compose a lot of the shots afterwards, so you can't even
I
do it
see.
live. And the other thing is, we didn't know if it would look stupid, like if it just looked like a dumb
Mm,
video game and a big joke, because some of there were these other virtual game shows that we had seen, and they didn't really come out that well, and they didn't perform that well. So we actually had some examples of this not working, but we ended up taking the plunge. So we went back to Budapest, and we went to the world's largest movie studio and did a 270-degree green screen, and we got the whole audience out there, in the middle of nowhere in the studio, all cheering and watching these crazy fights.
that's awesome.
Yeah,
So that's a hell of a bold leap right there, just making that call on, is this even going to look cooler? Like you're saying, kind of, video game trippy cheesy.
yeah.
And, where do you draw that line between being avant-garde versus, kind of going a little too far? And it sounds like you guys nailed it.
Yeah, we nailed it. The first one was a more photorealistic, so we did something that was kind of like Anchor Wat, but like a Fight Club style. And yeah, my partner's mom was like, "Man, I can't believe you guys went to Thailand and did all of that there." He's like, "No,
That's
mom."
wild. Could you tell us a little bit about how you are integrating the crypto token technology into, it seems like a lot of functional purposes, whether it's, fan engagement, whether it's motivating fighters, kind of almost, motivating the fighters on how they fight, motivating them in terms of spreading the word. There's a lot of functionality here, but again, new space, not entirely ironed out in terms of the regulatory atmosphere. So you guys are definitely taking bold leaps, calculated, sharpshooting attacks here, and it sounds like so far it's working out quite well. But it's going to be really exciting to see how it plays out in the future.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I was always excited about Web3 to begin with. I always followed the space. It has a lot of practical business uses. In general, it can be great at aligning incentives between, customers and businesses. But we actually discovered what we think is a killer application that really made it worth putting forth all of the work that it takes to make a transition. So the easiest way for me to describe it is just to kind of go through the process. So say you're a fan of karate combat, and we don't announce exactly how we do it, but airdrops come up. Maybe you follow us on Instagram, whatever it is, and you'll get a message saying, "Here's how you can claim your karate tokens." You go in a very, very simple app and you claim your tokens, and the tokens allow you to vote on governance aspects of the league, and you can vote on everything. I mean, even literally management, suppliers, but usually fans want to vote on more of the fun things. A big one we had was, are we going to add knees to the rule set? They ended up voting for it, and we added it. So you have this token that allows you to do things. But the most interesting thing that you can do with it, when a fight comes up, there's a whole bunch of fighters. You pick your favorite group of fighters, your favorite fighters who you think's going to win. If they win, you get more tokens. And we're pre-funding the tokens, so we're doing this for the first 3 years. And those tokens are already set aside in the treasury to essentially pay off the winners. And if your
Got it.
fighter loses, you don't lose anything.
Okay.
So it's not, so that means it's not regulated gaming. So it's sort of a wholesome way to incentivize our fans to become super fans and to have new fans in other areas of combat sports follow karate combat. And even while what we're doing is so unique, the basic value proposition there has been proven over and over again. DraftKings created a $10 billion company because because they found fantasy was a game of skill, not luck. Uh,
Hmm.
People have shown over and over if they have, financial upside on a sporting event, they become much more engaged, right? That's
Sure.
the basic concept,
Sure.
and it's been proven that that works.
Or even if it's $20, $50, $100, they're wrapped. Their attention is focused. They're not just watching in the background.
Yeah, yeah. When you think about it, it's almost cheaper to give people financial upside than to advertise to them to the point that a dentist is going to
Yeah,
show up and watch your fight. But all the research shows, hey man, if I give him a free $10, $20 of upside, if he fight wins, the guy's not only going to tune in, he's going to be like researching all the fighters for like an hour.
that is so. There's so many smart things going on there simultaneously. So number one, you're getting around gambling restrictions because it's really not legally speaking, it's not gambling now because you
Yeah.
can't really lose. You can only have an upshot, not a downshot. So the pool of money to sort of pay out the winners is coming from a liquidity pool you guys created and set aside, which essentially is saying, hey, look, we could either pay for this with hard dollars vis-a-vis marketing to try to motivate people to watch. Essentially, marketing is almost just like paying for instruments to get people to focus more. And that's pretty clever because, again, like user engagement and, again, generating those super fans, those super users of whether it's an app or a sporting contest or whatever is necessary. And, then some of those bold leaps on, all right, should we do knees or not? Well, we don't want to get it wrong and piss off our base. But now you're getting that input automatically. And while you're getting that input, you're literally, hyping them up at the same time. So it's just so many things going on there simultaneously. It seems like it's working synergistically.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's one of the things where it goes back to, managing employees as being a lot much different on Wall Street, right? If you're on Wall
Hmm.
Street, you could kind of explain to people the financial upside, everyone on the team is going to immediately realize what's going on. Great job, let's
Right.
do it. If you're dealing with, someone who's been recruiting fighters for 20 years or someone who's been doing, traditional sports sponsorships, and you say, hey, look, we're going to be running all of this collectively, at this point, and we're going to be taking, public input from everyone. We're going to have people on the outside involved. At first they're not often not comfortable with it, but now when they see how the Web3 community has become involved in what we're doing, the new fans that it's brought, essentially everyone's come around, and I think everyone across the company is really excited about the transition, and they've definitely learned a lot in the process.
That's wild. So again, that's a hell of a space that again it takes a unique mindset to even venture into, because in the entire landscape of crypto and tokens, the security regulations, I think everybody is appreciative. Well, everybody who's legitimate in the industry is appreciative of guidance, of some kind of clarity as far as knowing what the lanes are. And you're here really being a pioneer in a space that you're making the calculated shots based on the regulatory landscape to say we're in compliance with that. And some people might say, hey, we're going to sit back and just kind of, see how precedent plays out for 5, 10 years into the future. And you're saying, look, this is a market opportunity, not unlike you guys were in MedSec.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's different areas. As far as the regulatory environment for gaming and the up-only gaming, where does that sit? That was surprisingly black and white.
Okay.
We didn't even
The
have to
gaming part.
go. Yeah, because I mean, obviously, I've never done a ton of legal work on the regulatory side, and it's a pretty unique question. But actually, that's something all of our counsel was extremely comfortable with. That was one of the easiest hurdles to get over.
The gaming part seems pretty straightforward. I'm talking about the token liquidity pool part. That's the part that I'm thinking is
So
really
that,
impressive
yeah,
from
yeah,
your guys'
that's
standpoint.
yeah. So
I've
we're
spoken to players in that space that are very gun shy to even get involved in it, and I think they're missing the boat completely on a space that's going that's the wave of the future.
Well, I think it's just tricky. This is sort of a new field. People are talking about a Securities Act that was 80 years old or whatever it is now, and they're applying it to Web3, which obviously
Right.
didn't exist. And, there hasn't really been any too much, firm guidance. So you have, this whole basically like legal field where people are just like extrapolating what's going to happen. And then everyone, can choose on the risk spectrum that they want to operate. I think we're actually like a good example of like a wholesome sort of like high utility thing to do.
Mhm.
So I think on sort of the spectrum of regulation, I think we're naturally pretty low, and we've gone out of our way to check absolutely every box and make sure that we're doing everything exactly by the book.
I
We
love
sort
it.
of go on the side of caution, and we don't really have to take too big risks. We're not doing, something financially related. No one's running around like laundering money through karate tokens, right? It's
No, sure. Because you guys have the utility side. That you hit the nail on the head right there, because I think that's really what separates what you guys are doing from probably what's been given, Web3, and not that you guys are using NFTs, but that space as a whole has a very highly speculative, amorphous landscape, and you're really putting some concrete utility both for the fans, the fighters, all the way through. That this is very thought out. It's an instrument, and the way you're doling it out and the way the fans are interacting with it seems very just super obvious to a user from the standpoint of what their tokens are for. Hey, I'm going to put X amount of tokens on a fighter. If they win, I get more. If not, no loss. There's really no losers all the way around. There's no speculation in that
Yeah, I'm
respect.
not, so I don't follow crypto. I've been focused on obviously there's two companies, so I'm really not in the day-to-day weeds on all of the different projects. For a high level, you definitely see a lot of sort of like financial, money grab, like all these different hot areas kind of blow up to these ridiculous valuations. Everyone's chasing them. But I think
Right.
over time, you're going to see so many other business applications for Web3. It really
Sure.
is a great way to solve different issues. We've shown an opportunity that it can provide where there's real utility to a very traditional business, right?
Yeah.
We had nothing to do with Web3 a year and a half ago, right? I think you're going to see that across a lot of other businesses. As everyone gets more comfortable with it, I think you're going to be seeing it implemented in a number of new ways. We're definitely, probably like inning two or three of people, solving problems using this technology. And I'm really interested to see how it'll be used in other businesses.
Yeah, that entire space I think is very it's going to be interesting to see over the next decade. And like you said, I mean, we are in the early innings of it, and I think the people that are smart about it, and I think when you were describing this to me earlier, I thought it was genius, and the way you guys implemented it, both navigating that risk reward structure of look, we're going to set this up, in compliance. And we're going to use it in a way that really has a tangible effect on what the crowd sees as a benefit right from opening up that app to getting those tokens. I just think it's really clever all the way through. So well executed. You got to give you props on that. Let's move over with respect to the Web3 IP. There's going to be a lot of intellectual property is a very unique area of law. As I understand it, your brand strategy is a much more permissive IP strategy than most companies. Am I right?
Yes, for sure. A
Can you
lot
speak to
of
that a little bit?
Yeah, so a lot of things in the Web3 are pretty permissive with their IP. In media, not the case, and especially not in fight media. I mean, we still have
Okay.
pay-per-views. I was talking to someone in the industry the other day, and they brought up a story that was quite interesting. Originally, with baseball, the owners of the teams didn't want it on TV because they thought it was going to affect hot dog sales. When you're a media product, you need to have it everywhere. I can't fathom that people would be paying $70 a fight in 15 years. And we think the value of everyone being able to see the fights, especially in combat sports, which is growing, we think there's, as a media company, we think there's value in people seeing our media. So, we let
Hmm.
people post knockouts, stream over the top, and we've even gone a step further. So projects that are willing to build on top of us, we have a licensing structure that's very beneficial to them as long as they hit some basic requirements, and provide a certain amount back to the community. They have pretty much free reign with a lot of our IP, which I don't think you see any other organizations really doing something like that.
So where the UFC might chase people down and rip thing, get things taken off of YouTube immediately, and they have probably a whole policing arm to that effect, and they have to pay for that. You're looking at it as you set it up almost acknowledging the possibility and saying, you know
I should
what, we're
I
going to
should
make it
go I
work
should
for
go
us and
actually I should find
feed.
all those illegal streamers and say, hey, you guys want to show this for free? Have at
Yeah,
it.
seriously, you're like, hey, go be our
Those
affiliate
guys get a lot
marketers.
of views.
Go spread the word.
Did you see the
Uh,
one where the guys like they have a UFC video game that I think you're allowed to stream, who knows? And the guy's got a controller and he's just watching the live one. So it looks like a video game, but it's the live one. He's like illegal streaming it.
So I think there's a really just a pretty cool legal thread here through a lot of these both the formation of the businesses, the market opportunities you're spotting, and then even just how you're navigating the landscape where you get the risk reward, the gas clutch is a really tough balance for any business owner. And I think the way you've been navigating it I think is largely responsible for these innovative fields and also your success. Have there been any, just looking backwards here, have there been any sort of lessons that you could sort of share with us, with any of the listeners on, hey, listen, here's as you're navigating that risk reward, cost benefit, gas clutch line, any times where anything's, any time you felt like you were either too conservative or too risky and kind of, some of the lessons that, smacked you in the face along the way?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it for me, the biggest learning experience has definitely been on the management side. You know
Mm,
how sort of like lenient versus how much to be lenient versus pushing employees. I
mm,
think finding that balance is different can be a different balance to find. Um, Frankly, work from home is a challenge as well. I mean, I think everyone was okay with that and it's great for the employees, but I think there's a percentage of employees that no doubt productivity can go down a lot. And a
mm.
lot of what we do, we were naturally a very dispersed league. We've naturally had employees all over the world, so that was something we're always fighting with. But yeah, even more so with work from home. Most of the people at our company work from home, and some of those employees, sometimes you'll find certain not employees, but individuals that don't, contribute as much as other team members.
Understood. And then you've got to obviously manage that. When do you start getting a little heavy-handed, or when do you just kind of let people, kind of hit their stride, and how do you manage them? Again, very different in terms of the different
Yeah.
spaces you've been in.
Yeah, and then yeah, that's always tricky. And then finding personnel, that's always a tricky one as well. A lot of these, a lot of these sort of social media types are heavily sought after, and there aren't that many people that are truly experts in the field.
Hmm.
So navigating a lot of that is always difficult. The one thing that we've been lucky with, MedSec especially, that's a brand that people are excited about, so they're able to find researchers. And almost everybody loves combat sports. It's a pretty big demo. So we're
Yeah.
able to attract a lot of talent, and honestly, tons of, karate isn't a niche sport. Over 100 million people do Shotokan, one type of karate. So there's a huge base of passionate people out there as well that we're able to draw from.
One question I have for you is, as budding business owners or even just early stage pioneers are considering their road, you mentioned earlier that you and the other co-founders largely self-capitalized right from the outset. There's a lot of different, tactics people can employ as far as, looking at VCs, self-capitalizing, start slow, stages of funding. Were there any sort of lessons you've learned or regrets or even just advice in general on that topic of funding a venture and getting it off the ground?
Well, I'm a traditional guy. Unfortunately, I didn't take my own advice with karate combat, but look, businesses don't fail because they're making money, right? Startups basically, a lot of these startups are actually in a great position, and they should be funded, and they're not, and they just run out of money, right?
Uh-huh.
So I think, obviously it's easy if you're starting with, you can find businesses that are cash flowing, that still have that big upside, right? You don't always have to be having these businesses that have huge losses up front for bigger upside, right? So, if I was an entrepreneur and generally what I look for is, find these businesses that have upside, but, you can kind of scale to get there and you're not
I
required to
see.
make a big upfront investment and you're, not required to go out and raise money in the future that you might not be able to raise. Once again, we tried to start karate combat with as little as possible capital as possible and get to break even. And it ended up even taking us more than we thought. And we did raise some money externally, which ended up being a plus because we have excellent partners. So it worked out for us. But in a different market, in a different time, maybe that capital wouldn't be there and we'd be in a different position. So I
Right.
always think that these businesses that require the huge upfront investment and are really risky to fund, you don't really get much more at the end of the day, and you're putting all your eggs in one basket. So maybe focus on something that even if it's a new idea, self funds or has favorable working capital, things along those lines. So you're not beholden to the market to fund some big funding gap.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So instead of necessarily fund building the Titanic before you put it in the water, maybe build a rowboat, see if it's see if it's working properly. If it is, you can always build it bigger and better. But first, at least just make sure it floats.
Yep, yeah, but once again, we didn't take our advice. We heard this idea and we said, we saw the vision. We're like, we have to do it. It's gonna be so much fun.
And I guess that's also where you really found that almost that you saw a way to require a lot more upfront infrastructure, a lot more upfront spend by packing, a Madison Square Garden, and you said, we really don't need to. Kind of the way you were describing it earlier, we can do this a smarter, cleverer way.
Yeah, exactly. If we had to go the traditional butts and seat route, I don't know if we would have undertaken this. Then we'd
Yeah.
be in the same position a lot of these other guys that are highly reliant on funding.
Hmm.
The only people really making money in combat sports are the regional people in the UFC. So a lot
Uh-huh.
of these other organizations have spent 10 years; they're still not cash flow positive.
Wow. Well, I guess, I mean, really, I kind of see it as you really did take your own advice because, you saw it as you saw that wall in front of you and you kind of figured out, hey, look, there's a grappling hook. Let's, let's figure out a
Yeah,
different way.
yeah,
And you really kind of came up with an innovative way to make a spectacle without requiring, all those,
yeah.
a million butts and seats.
I went back. The other thing that we did that was interesting, when I went back to how we were filming it with this virtual background. What we
Hmm.
used to do is film four events at once. So we would
Oh,
start at
okay.
8 a.m.
Okay.
and just
Yeah.
film literally four events in a row. So it's pretty cool. You get to sit around and watch fights like all day long,
Yeah.
like
It's a
one
good,
after the other, right?
hell of a
Um,
bang for your buck.
yeah, yeah. So we were able to kind of get 4 for 1 on that. But yeah, we've always been focused on, how to really create a really cool product, but keep the cost down as low as possible.
So let me ask you this. I mean, you've gone from industry to industry here. Do you at this point still feel this desire to disrupt and innovate in yet another industry? Are you saying, you're looking at the world, you're looking at different landscapes. Does that penchant, still sit there to say, what, what's stopping me from taking over some other market?
Well, yeah, well, I'm definitely going to take a break this time. I think there were about 5 days between MedSec and Karate Combat. I was literally like my last day at the MedSec office, and I'm having this
Oh
meeting.
my
The
God.
day I had the Karate Combat meeting. So, yeah. So I'll definitely take some time off, and then I guess I'll see how things stand after that.
Is there another market that you sort of have whether it's from a personality perspective or a business perspective, your eyes on saying, you know what, I see a market opportunity, or wow, that would be a fun market to get involved in.
I've seen a couple, but nothing that's really grabbing me at this point.
Okay.
There's definitely a lot of interesting things happening out there, though.
So let me ask you this, and again, this is an interesting one for both the investors and the business owners out there. What are some of the criteria that you use personally to evaluate whether a project is worthy of getting involved in any capacity? Especially as, say, an operator owner, let alone, or even a heavy investor.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I would say, luckily I learned it when I was young. I think a lot of younger guys on Wall Street don't value management as much. I had the opportunity of learning some of the best guys in the business from day one. And I really saw how they kind of evaluated management and how important it was. We would go out of our way to sometimes overcompensate. We one time we brought a manager from like a healthcare company to a theme park because he was the best guy, and you know
Mm.
what? He did extremely well at the theme park as well, right? So I think that's one of the most important things out there. And then other than that, it's just basic, business understanding. So I think the tool we used to use when I was younger, the easiest way to analyze a business, when you've done it over and over, you can kind of like look at certain areas quickly. Um, like in obvious areas like how price negotiation happens, when your product's bought or sold, like what determines the price. That's usually like one of the like trick areas to look. But the easiest way to fully understand a business is just to understand every single part about it, start to finish. So if you have access to the employees, say they're building a bus, don't ask them basically how it works. Say, okay, like how is the factory built? What's the progress? Like literally every single thing that would have to happen for you to literally do it yourself, right?
Okay.
Every little part of that process, from starting the factory to building the bus to how they're getting their materials, the lead time, just like every little thing about that. And then you get a pretty good feel of of what quality the business is. And then more importantly, if something goes wrong, say you're an investor and it's a public company, if you have that detailed understanding, if something breaks, they can't get whatever the chassis for the bus. Well, you know how unique that is. If there's like two suppliers or not, right? If you really understand the business, whereas that's not going to be relevant 99% of the time, but it's still sort of an important thing to understand. So that was sort of the trick that I would use when I was analyzing a lot of businesses when I was younger.
So just so we're clear, you do take the Maverick hat on pretty readily, but at the same time, you do your homework. You're not going to just take that sniper shot without measuring a few times first. You're testing that vine, you're testing all the vines around it before you take that swing.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, even when we did karate combat, we were researching it for just yeah we were researching it for a month, and then even when we started we weren't saying, oh, let's go and have these events, right? We said we're just, I think the initial funding was like $50,000 just to have some test fights, and
Hmm.
do some legal work, and just do the absolute basics. So we really kind of put our feet in the water slowly there, but then once we realized it was coming together, then we were all in moving forward.
I think that's a heck of a lesson for anyone listening to this. Is that's probably something that people might not necessarily realize on what's under the hood and kind of what goes on in the kitchen before the food's even brought out to the public. Of really that due diligence and even just those measured tests of making sure, hey, proof of concept is there, the situation, like you're saying, if you're examining a bus, where's the suppliers of the different parts, so that you're making sure there's not some gaping hole that's just going to smack you in the face later on.
Yeah, exactly. So it's definitely important with any investment, and definitely if you're going to get involved in something.
I love it. Let me ask you this. Any just general advice that we haven't touched on for whether it's starting and scaling business owners out there, whether it's entrepreneurs, whether it's, in-house counsel, looking to advise their team, just, other stories or lessons that we haven't touched on if you have the opportunity.
No, not much overall. I mean, look, we talked about the calculated approach, but I'd say at the same time, the most important thing I think for a lot of these companies is just to move forward rapidly, focus on the things that matter and kind of get it done. And the other thing is, I think a lot of companies focus on competition too much. It
Mm,
definitely but and especially startups. It definitely matters understanding the space. Um, but it's more important, the execution, right? There were a number of
right.
people that had the same idea as Uber, right?
Sure.
I think it's more about just moving forward, having a great product, than sitting there saying, "Oh, is someone copying my idea?" Right?
Hmm.
So I think that's something that sometimes people go the wrong direction about. And it's really important just to kind of move forward on your own. Obviously you have to be aware of what's going on. I think people overcompensate for it to some extent.
Hello. So having that confidence to move forward, but not getting bogged down in the weeds of what everyone else is doing. Just worry about what you're doing, and put your energy in that.
Yep.
One of the questions I want to ask here is kind of the trademark question here for the EsquireX files. If you had a coat of arms, if you will, to sort of symbolize you, your business journey, your approach, what symbols or motifs or mantras would it contain, and kind of what would the symbolism, or effect of those be?
Oh, that's a tough one. I don't know. I'll choose the easy one since it's fighting. You have to be like water. I'll choose the Bruce Lee one. I'll use water.
Cool.
You have to learn things. You have to be flexible. You have to adjust to everything. So
I like it.
make it easy.
Um, well, any final message that you'd like to convey that we haven't hit on?
No, that's pretty much it. It was a pleasure,
It
pleasure talking to you, and definitely have me
absolutely
back on
was.
anytime.
I'd love to. Karate Combat. I mean, you guys are going strong. You've basically got about once every month or two as a schedule. Where
Yep.
can people watch Karate Combat? Tell people where to check it out, how to
Yeah,
check it out, and
back to the
what to
open
do.
IP. So, December 15th, we're having a huge fight. Pettis versus Henderson, two UFC champions. They had a great fight before, and they're two excellent strikers, but they're not the best on the ground. So I think we're gonna we'll watch them, and I think one of their last fights had one of the biggest highlights ever. The guy, I'm not sure if you've seen that picture where he runs off the cage and kicks his opponent. But they had one of the most exciting fights ever historically, and I think that this will be even more exciting. And it's free. Karate.com, YouTube, December 15th. Tune in and definitely download the Karate app and check out Up Only Gaming. Pick your fighters to win and see how it turns out.
Awesome. Everyone check it out. I can tell you the Karate Combat fights are wild when you're there, but the way you guys do the production, I mean, man, the finished result when you're watching it from home is grade A. So, very excited to have you on, Rob. Thanks so much for sharing all your insights here. It's been a heck of a journey for you, and can't wait to see where Karate Combat and your career in general continues.
Awesome. Sounds good.
Thanks
Thanks
so much
for
for
having me
coming
on.
on.